Hi, I'm Dr. Carol Brown with the Equipping Minds Brain Development Center, and I am so honored to have you join this talk on implementing cognitive skill goals for your students' IEP or 504 plan at home. I can't tell you how important this session is going to be for you if your student has an IEP or 504. I have a unique opportunity and privilege to work with private schools, public schools, and homeschoolers throughout the world and have read thousands of psychological evaluations, which, as you know, if you're sitting here in this session, will tell you where your students' cognitive abilities lie. Now, maybe they gave the WISC or maybe they gave the Woodcock-Johnson test of cognitive abilities. Those are the two most popular ones. However, many times in your IEP or 504, the goals that you've had all center around academics and totally ignore those cognitive areas that they just tested. And so that's why I want to focus on the cognitive for our time today, because you probably have goals in all the other academic areas, possibly even in communication, in motor planning, if you're working with an OT or a speech therapist as well. So those goals are in there. Now, I will tell you, sometimes you're going to see it say cognitive goals, but if you read those closely, they have more to do with academic areas. So just wanted to clarify that. Now, we're going to take a look at some resources that are actually here in the Equipping Minds Cognitive Development curriculum. Because if we're going to increase cognitive skills, we need a plan, a path on how to do that. And where there are many reading curriculums, math curriculums, writing curriculums, and they're using those to establish goals to improve those areas in that IEP or that 504. And we need a cognitive curriculum. And Equipping Minds, to my knowledge, is the only cognitive curriculum that is available. Now, you're going to get to have some resources from this, and I also encourage you to visit the Equipping Minds YouTube channel, where there is a free 8-week workshop where you can learn many of these cognitive games at no cost to you, plus some free downloads and handouts. They're also available through this talk. And so I want you to know that all those are right there for you to be able to start using when you get off of this session and to start implementing into your school year as we're all gearing up for what lies ahead. And right now, there are students who are still getting services. The schools are still required to provide services, but we are now looking at adding a dimension of that whole cognitive piece. Because one thing that you may have seen is your student continues to need that 504 or that IEP, and you may be pleased as can be with how they're meeting their goals and how they're progressing, or you may not be. You may be a little frustrated. And even maybe during this season that we're in right now, you have seen some areas that you're a little perplexed on where your child is functioning. Now, what we're going to do as we're looking at this is to help you understand, first of all, what we are talking about with cognitive skills. And if you've got your neuropsych, you can pull that out. You might remember it. You saw some subscores for processing and working memory and comprehension and fluid reasoning and visual spatial skills, and then probably an IQ composite. And if your child has a dyslexia or any SLD diagnosis, then their IQ is falling in an average range. Could be a little below average, could be even above average. So we want to discuss those students, but I also really want to talk about our students whose IQs are where it's an intellectual disability range. And many times there is a belief, even for many of these students, that that IQ score, that those processing, that the working memory cannot change. And what I'm going to tell you today is that's simply not true. That's not the case. Now, left by themselves without any intervention, it is the case. However, if you put a human mediator, yourself as a parent, a therapist, a teacher, between the student and you are working together intentionally through these games that you're going to have access to, then we have seen those scores go up 10 points, 20 points, 30 points. And I encourage you to look at the published research on the Equipping Minds website, and can also show you some other research in those areas. But when someone has an intellectual disability, the first thing we should be working on are those cognitive areas, because until those are addressed, you're going to hit walls. To maybe I'll see a 15-year-old who's still functioning on a first grade level or a third grade level or a fifth grade level in some areas. And it seems that they hit a wall and that progression is not happening. The reason is because the focus was purely on academics, purely on modifications, accommodations, and strategies. And while those can seem like wonderful supports, they are not going in to change the brain. It may get you to pass a test, but we want to create neuropathways, strengthen neuropathways, and connect neuropathways so that we see that your child is now able to follow multi-step directions. So one thing you're going to hear from me is that I'm passionate about equipping teachers and speech therapists and occupational therapists and psychologists, but probably most of all, I am incredibly passionate about equipping parents, because I was that parent who was sitting there reading that neuropsych, feeling very discouraged about where our son could go, and was just hearing limitations. And I didn't want to live in that world of just limitations. I wanted to live in a world of possibilities and of hope. And so while I had a background in rehabilitation counseling and was fascinated with neuroscience, when it affected us personally as a family, and I had a child who was not learning to read, who was not speaking, who had all these challenges, and was being told so many different things. But I was very thankful for some therapists who encouraged me and allowed me to participate in the therapy sessions and to learn, and so I could see what to do the other days of the week that he wasn't in his private speech therapy or occupational therapy. And so 11 years ago, when I stepped out of private school administration and started Equipping Minds, my focus was on the cognitive because I saw that as the piece that had kind of been underdeveloped, honestly. And then when I would look for resources to really do that well, I wasn't finding anything. And so I started developing it and creating it. I will tell you, I then, about 2 years after I started in this journey, in developing this curriculum, I did learn about the Feuerstein Institute over in Israel and found out they had been addressing the underlying cognitive functions for years, and had seen that the brain could change. And that was amazing. And so Equipping Minds started building on that incredible work of the Feuerstein Institute and Dr. Ruben Feuerstein to continue to increase and find ways to impact and enhance processing, attention, working memory, which all of that put together is, you may hear the term executive functioning disorder, executive functioning skills. And so this has been my focus. And what is so fun about this, and yes, I said fun, is that once we start addressing the cognitive areas, those academic areas then start to improve on their own because they needed the cognitive to be strengthened, to be able to hold on to those directions for math, to be able to hold on to the sounds they were hearing for reading and for spelling, and to be able to hold on to those images to comprehend. And I will tell you, some of your students, maybe you're listening to this and your child didn't even get an IEP or 504, or maybe theirs isn't a learning disability, but a behavior disorder. And I will contend that I have yet to see a behavior disorder that is not rooted in cognitive deficiencies. Because if you're not able to hold on to information, if you are unable to process what you're seeing or what you're hearing, then you're going to have some behavior challenges in at least half of those students, if not more. And so sometimes it can get misdiagnosed because maybe that behavior, maybe that student comes in from another district and they've already had some academic trauma, or you have students who have had trauma. Maybe you're an adoptive parent and or you're a foster care parent, or just so many different things bring trauma upon our system, and especially on our children's system. And so that can all impact, and it impacts the cognitive. And so by coming in with cognitive games that are very intentional, it's going to help build confidence, which is huge. It's going to help build relationships. It's going to help build language. It's going to help build social skills. So, and some of y'all may be saying, but wait, we do have a language component or a social skills component or a behavior component in our IEP. But that's not how we're going in by playing games. Or maybe you are at a school that is looking at that. I do have a unique privilege of working with different states that they will write in the IEP that they're going to do a cognitive program. And so I actually zoom in to schools, in different states and different countries and provide our services if someone needs us to do it. But like we've also said this is something that parents can learn to do, or the therapist you're already working with can bring into the sessions. Because when you go to the Equipping Minds website, you're going to see some online courses that are for professional development, for teachers, for parents, as well as the free workshop that you'll see on the YouTube channel. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to take a look at this, and I'm going to share my screen, and we are going to pull this up, and this is your guide you're going to get to use. And one of the most important things is first making sure we're talking the same language. And here's our description of processing speed. And it basically is that ability to perform cognitive tasks, particularly when measured under pressure, to maintain focused attention. So time, how much time it takes to get something done. Those attention skills, how quickly they can scan a sheet and visually process what they're seeing. One thing that I've done here for you is to see exercises to assess these skills. And I give examples from the Equipping Minds curriculum and from the free handouts that you have, to just read the sheet that has the numbers on it and see how fluently they can do that. And then to find the two numbers that are the same and say the number or the letter on a deck of cards that they see as fast as they can, or just the colors that they see on the arrows, on the colored arrow sheet that you have access to. And so that's how I'll kind of check even more specifically and write down the time, how quickly they did that, how accurately they were able to do that, to get a baseline for their processing. So that's kind of your start point. And then as you're thinking, what's going to be my goal? Well, maybe now they can hold on to a one-step direction. Well, you want them to hold on to a two-step. Let's not go from 1 to 5, okay? Maybe 1 to 2, then 1 to 3. Let's do some attainable goals, but still always looking ahead. And then the other thing you're going to see on your handout is how we actually then go in, what's the intervention? So here's how we get a baseline so we can help set our goal that we want it to be, let's say it takes them 2 minutes to read the sheet. Well, your goal is that they could do it in 1.5 minutes, possibly 25% faster. And then here are some of the games, the exercises to train that processing speed. Now, one of the biggest things you're going to see is working memory. And hands down, I am just going to tell you that Dr. Tracy Alloway has done so much work in this area, and every single learning challenge you will see either the working memory being lower than other scores, or the processing, or both. And especially when you get hit by both of those, it can be super challenging, even though you might have a student who on their reasoning scores was incredibly strong, maybe even above average. And it greatly impacts because, the child's very, very bright, but can't process things fast enough, or they can't hold on to the directions they're hearing. And that's where it's, just by saying, oh, I'm going to give you, these rewards if you can hold on to these directions, but you never did anything to help strengthen that working memory, then they're just going to feel more defeated. Enticing with a reward isn't going to improve attention if those cognitive deficits are there. It's just not. I could try all day long to cut down a tree with a butter knife, but it's not going to happen. And I would just feel more and more defeated and frustrated. But with working memory, here's a little guide for you. Because working memory is that ability to hold on to information and to do something with it. For a 5 to 6-year-old, 2 steps. 7 to 9, 3 steps. 10 to 12, 4 steps. 13 to 15, 5 steps. 16 to 30, 6 steps. And 40 plus 5 steps. And that's just a baseline that psychologists have given. But that is something that can, your goals can eventually be much higher than that. And so then you're going to see the Stroop test, which is a long-standing Stroop effect that's used to look at working memory. And then with the blink cards, you're going to see this, especially if you watch, and please watch the YouTube workshop where you're looking at something, and I'll just use like a deck of cards, for example, and put up a card, and you would say the number on the card, and then on the next card we'd alternate and take turns and say the color of the card, and then on the third card you would alternate and say the suit. So you might be saying 5 black diamonds, and seeing how they can hold on to that sequence. So working memory, and you'll see different ways that we will look at that. Now, with working memory, there's our general working memory, and more specifically coming into auditory working memory, when you are just getting that verbal instruction alone. And the way that they'll test this on the WISC or the Woodcock-Johnson is by digit span. And so they'll tell a student to say the numbers they hear forwards, to say them backwards, say some words that they heard, and just kind of some, I don't want to give away the whole test, but they're giving you words and letters and numbers and things to listen to and repeat back and hold on to that. And so you can hear that. Now, I'm going to jump in right here and say, I'm just going to ask you, please don't relinquish and say, well, my child's a visual learner, and so I'm going to just give tons of visual cues for my child. And while that may help them hold on to some things, and we all keep, calendars and have visual reminders, but in real life, people are going to give them auditory directions for the rest of their lives, and whether it's in trade or college or in life, in a job, they're not going to stop and give visual cues every time they're giving directions. I think one of the most profound things I had heard recently was, even if someone, gets, called over by a police officer, and the police officer tells them, put your hands on your head, turn around, and drop to the ground. And the person doesn't remember what they just heard. Not that they were trying to forget. One, maybe they were a little bit under stress. And then 2, maybe they can't hold on to a 3-step direction. Maybe they have a cognitive delay. They've had post-concussion syndrome. They have severe autism or Down syndrome, or something that is impacting fetal alcohol syndrome, that ability to hold on. And then it can look like they're being disrespectful. Wait, where do I put my hands? And they put their hands to their side, and it looks like they're reaching for something, and that can have some pretty negative effects and impacts. So that auditory memory, we can't always have visual cues and supports out in real life And if we get used to always having people rescue us, so to speak, then the brain doesn't change. So it's a real balance between giving the support when you need, but also saying, hey, this auditory memory is a real challenge for my child. I'm going to strengthen that. I'm not going to just ignore it. I'm going to strengthen it. And that can be done in a really just fun way with the different games. And then visual memory. Like we said, some people, if they see it, absolutely remember what they see. Other people can see something. So imagine a deck of cards and you show them 3 cards, and then you turn over the cards, and then you ask them to tell you what they just saw. And you're going to have students, adults, who can absolutely do that, and others who might get one thing, or maybe they remember part of something, but not all 3. And then if you ask them to recall it 2 minutes later. So really, where is that visual memory? Can they hold on to things? Or do they need that visual stimuli before them at all times because their visualization is actually very weak? Okay, so we have all kinds of fun games that you can use to develop that. Probably my favorite is we have many different ways to play tic-tac-toe in using those. And then long-term memory. And one way that they'll check this is maybe they'll, ask you to name all the words you can think of that start with the T as in Tom sound. Or my favorite one is to ask them to name as many animals as they can in a minute. And because I know that there are probably numerous animals in their long-term memory, and I want to see how quickly they can access to that. And then that's just a really fun thing to do, because if I asked you to recall all of the, Major League Baseball Cy Young winners, I couldn't do it. Maybe you could, but that would not be a good assessment of my long-term memory retrieval, because there's nothing to retrieve, because I don't know those Cy Young winners. But maybe someone who is a big baseball fan, they absolutely do. So that would be a great question for them. So it's also knowing your student, but practicing saying, hey, tell me all of, the Pokemons that you can think of, or tell me all of your favorite basketball players, or just finding whatever that interest is. Then the next one, and this is really an interesting one, is the whole visual processing, the visual spatial reasoning when we're looking at puzzles and patterns. Sometimes you can have other students have some real deficits in other areas, but this can be a real strength. Now, a lot of times this one doesn't get developed as much. You do have kids who do puzzles at home or love to do things with Legos, absolutely. And then we have some listed here that you're going to see to be able to work on that visual spatial piece, because those are the people that are great at going in and fixing things and seeing solutions, can work those things in their minds. And then the auditory processing. Now, this is where you probably definitely see some goals if reading is a challenge. These are probably put in there because this has to do with phonemic awareness and being able to decode when you're spelling and reading, decoding and encoding for spelling and reading. But a piece that can be missing is that working memory. So developing that working memory so that they can tell the number of sounds they're hearing, the order of the sounds. Are they the same or are they different? Another piece that is not talked about hardly at all um, is with auditory processing deficits, when they are not hearing the difference in the short vowel sounds, for example, or if they're always saying what, or they have difficulty repeating a word, like if you said Tutankhamun, what would you hear? Or the kids who say, um, mispronounce words all the time that they hear. Well, that auditory processing disorder can actually be rehabilitated with the use of sound therapy. There are quite a few sound therapy programs that are now available. There's the Tomatis program and the integrative listening program. We use one out of Australia, the Sound Therapy International, that you can see on the Equipping Minds site. I like that one because I like the price point. It's a fraction of the cost of the other programs, and you can use it with multiple children. And in schools, we have a lot of schools that get it, and they will use a splitter and use it with, maybe 4 kids at one time. Or they'll get it for different classes and share it throughout the day. So it's great to use that way. And then a phonics phone as well. And you can make those, and we like to use those where they turn so that you can actually speak into the right ear, into that main language center. And that can really help to make sure they're actually hearing the sound. So it's just a PVC pipe and you put it up to the student's right ear, and that can help increase the percentage of them meeting those goals for phonemic awareness and being able to read. And then logic and reasoning. And y'all, this can be developed in students, and we see this with playing tic-tac-toe, the game set, the mind word perplexers, tangrams, color code. You'll see just a couple of those things listed as they're able to problem solve and to see patterns and make inferences. Another big thing when you're testing with logic and reasoning is, do they stop and think before they're answering? Because you have a student who their logic skills may be strong, but they're impulsive, and they may be testing and they just are blurting things out, right? And not stopping and thinking. The next area that cognition really impacts is comprehension. So many times when someone's struggling with comprehension, there's more of a focus on going back and finding the answer, more strategies instead of let's teach you how to visualize, how to make a picture in your head. And this comes from the work of Aristotle and his 10 categories of being, and the whole work on memory and visualization that happened over 2,400 years ago. So I'm a classical educator by trade, and so was familiar with that. The Linda Bell programs took Aristotle's work and made a visualizing and verbalizing curriculum with that. It's a more formal one. We kind of come in Aristotle's path, but both ways will get you there. And we like to build that visualization with our students. So that's kind of an overview of the definitions. The other thing I wanted to provide you all with was a learning screening. Okay, and maybe you have not done one yet. Maybe you haven't had testing done and you're in on this session right now and you're trying to decide shouldn't you, what should you do? This is a learning screening. And so this is where you are rating your child, your student, to a 0 for never, 1 for rarely, 2 occasionally, 3 frequently, or 4 very frequently. And it's looking at the area of reading, and it just helps you have a picture of maybe what's going on. Now, if you feel like you need to ask your child some of these questions, absolutely do that and do that together. And it's, if you're trying to explain that, you're saying, hey, I'm just trying to figure out how to help you with school and how you learn best. Um, and it also will look at writing, and then body and spatial awareness, some questions there, some oral expressive language. And this also helps you see, oh, wait a minute, they have a lot of fours in oral expressive language. They have difficulty expressing themselves in words. They have difficulty finding the right word to say in a conversation, or they talk around the subjects instead of getting to the point. Oh, wait, maybe they have an expressive language challenge. Yes, here we go. And then receptive language. And so these can also help you see, oh, is this an area? It's not about putting a label on or a diagnosis. It's, here are some challenges we're seeing now. Let's see if we can go in and change these so that those 4 for extremely become a 2, that it's not happening as much, or even a 1, a rarely. And then it looks at math, it looks at sequencing, that ability to sequence, abstraction. Can they get jokes, or do they take things too literally? Organizational skills that you'll see, and then memory questions, social skills questions, sensory integration as well. And this has been adapted from the Amen clinics. So wanted to share this with you. Now, the cognitive skills, the overall goal, if you were then writing this up, would be, for example, the student will develop the ability to attend to individual tasks and will improve processing speed. The student will follow multiple step directions. The student will successfully complete 24 or more weeks of a proven cognitive training program. I would say Equipping Minds, that addresses deficits in processing, working memory, attention, comprehension, reasoning, and visual spatial skills for at least 30 minutes per day every weekday. Now, if you did it for 45 minutes, well, it might be 16 weeks, or 60 minutes, 12 weeks. That's just kind of a ballpark, depending on your student. And then you could have a little sheet like this where you have your processing speed, then your goals. And these are just some very basic goals. Some working memory, some auditory memory, some visual memory, some long-term memory, your visual spatial reasoning and auditory processing, logic and reasoning, and reading comprehension. So that way you can put in what you're working on. You're working on this ability, what your goal is, and then you've got up there in your other sheet the tools you're going to use to get there. And then you can write down your times, or, oh, they were able to hold on to 3 letters or to 2 words, or so just looking at those different aspects. So I just wanted to share that with you so you would be able to have an idea if you want to put in cognitive skills as part of your IEP this year. I really encourage you, if you have an IEP, I'm just telling you, to ignore the cognitive skills is to ignore the foundations of learning. I'll say all the time, the cognitive core before the common core. And I'm doing another talk. You can go back and hear it, or you'll have time to hear it on developing a whole brain fitness program. And that whole aspect of, we have been missing this piece of cognitive training in our schools, and it is um, it's just so crucial. It is simply so crucial. It's what they test. It's what's read that neuropsych. And when you read all of that and you're going, but wait a minute, then they didn't tell me how to increase processing, they told me how to give strategies and accommodations, but that doesn't change it. And what we want to see is that change. We're not going for perfection, please hear me. We want them to reach that full potential that they have, that God has for them. And I believe we're all created for a purpose. And so, I will tell you, when you are developing cognitive skills, it's a journey. Because we all know that if someone has a concussion, a car accident, an illness, trauma, all those things can impact our cognitive abilities. But I want you to know, what I need you to hear is, regardless of age, please hear me, regardless of age, if you're sitting here and thinking, well, my child's 13, we missed the window, you did not miss anything. You simply did not. Please hear that. Dr. Feuerstein's work, please go look up Dr. Reuben Feuerstein and the Feuerstein Institute. Oh my word, read Changing Minds and Brains. Read my research. Please understand that the brain can change, but you have to have a human being, a human mediator who is being intentional. But needs to be engaging and fun, and listen to that YouTube channel. I think I've told you that maybe 3 or 4 times now, because equipping minds, when we do it, it's to be fun, because if your body is feeling stress, cortisol is released, that stress hormone, and the brain can shut down, and they get frustrated, and then the behavior problems, and it's just not a positive experience for anybody, but we want it to be. We want it to be. So I am going to be available now for questions. In the chat is what I'm hoping, how this is going to work. And so look forward to doing that. You can reach out to me directly at cbrown@equippingminds.com and set up a time for a consult, or send me an email with questions. But I hope that you see the importance of adding cognitive skills into your students' individualized education plan this school year. Thank you so much for joining me.